When they saw my medals, their faces changed. The same people who moments ago treated me like garbage now couldn't meet my eyes. But James Maxwell, CEO of Blooming Life Essentials, had seen everything. And what happened next would change lives forever. Sergeant William Bill Thompson stood at the entrance of Blooming Life Essentials store number 447, his weathered hands clutching his Vietnam War service medals. His military jacket, though worn and faded, still bore the proud insignia of his unit. The same jacket that, moments ago, had caused store employee Rachel Stevens to call security, claiming he was making customers uncomfortable. But what Rachel didn't know, what none of them knew, was that James Maxwell, the founder and CEO of Blooming Life Essentials, was sitting quietly in the corner of the store's cafe, watching everything unfold. The retail mogul had chosen this location, tucked away in the heart of Millbrook Valley, for his monthly undercover store visit. But today's observations would take an unexpected turn. As Bill Thompson's trembling fingers traced the outline of his Purple Heart, his mind drifted back to the jungles of Vietnam, where he'd saved his entire platoon from an ambush. Now, 40 years later, he stood here, fighting a different kind of battle, one against prejudice, assumptions, and the invisible wounds that had left him homeless but not hopeless. The story of what transpired that day at Blooming Life Essentials store number 447 would become a turning point not just for Bill Thompson, but for an entire corporate culture. It would remind America that sometimes our heroes walk among us unrecognized, and that true character reveals itself in how we treat those who seem to have nothing to offer us. Ladies and gentlemen, before we continue with this extraordinary tale of redemption and justice, take a moment to subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more stories of unsung heroes to light. The morning had started like any other at Blooming Life Essentials. The store, with its pristine aisles and carefully curated displays, was preparing for another busy day. Sarah Chun, the morning shift supervisor, was briefing her team about the day's sales targets, unaware that both her boss and a homeless veteran were about to change everything. James Maxwell had arrived early, dressed in casual clothes, his usual tailored suits replaced by jeans and a simple sweater. He'd chosen a quiet corner of the store's cafe, ordered a coffee, and settled in to observe. His company had grown rapidly over the past decade, expanding from a single store to a nationwide chain of home goods retailers. But with this growth came concerns. Were they staying true to their founding principles of dignity, respect, and service to all? Bill Thompson hadn't planned on entering Blooming Life Essentials that morning. He'd been searching for a place to warm up, maybe use a bathroom, when the store's welcoming atmosphere and the aroma of fresh coffee drew him in. His VA benefits had been delayed again, and the shelter where he usually stayed was temporarily closed for renovations. The medals in his pocket were all he had left of his former life, that and the memories that haunted his sleepless nights. As Bill stepped through the automatic doors, Rachel Stevens was the first to notice him. Her reaction was immediate and unmistakable. She straightened up behind the customer service counter, her hand instinctively moving toward the security button. "Can I help you?" she called out, her voice sharp with suspicion. Bill approached slowly, careful to keep his hands visible. "Good morning, ma'am. I was wondering if I could use your restroom? It's quite cold outside." Rachel's response cut through the air like a knife. "Sir, our restrooms are for paying customers only. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." From his corner in the cafe, James Maxwell leaned forward, his coffee forgotten. He'd seen this scene play out in other stores, the tension, the assumptions, the quiet discrimination. But something about this particular interaction made him pause. Perhaps it was the dignity in the homeless man's bearing, or the way he stood, straight-backed despite Rachel's dismissive tone. What happened next would shake the foundations of Blooming Life Essentials and force everyone involved to confront their own prejudices and assumptions. But more importantly, it would remind them, and all of us, that sometimes the most valuable lessons come from the most unexpected teachers. Stay tuned as we continue this powerful story of redemption, justice, and the triumph of human dignity. The events that unfolded that day would not only transform lives, but would become a testament to the power of compassion and the importance of looking beyond appearances. Little did Rachel Stevens know that her actions that morning would not only cost her her job, but would catalyze a nationwide conversation about how we treat our veterans, our homeless, and ultimately each other. As Bill Thompson stood there, his medals weighing heavy in his pocket, and James Maxwell watched from his hidden vantage point, the stage was set for an extraordinary chain of events that would touch countless lives. The tension in Blooming Life Essentials store number 447 reached a breaking point when Rachel Stevens called for security. Michael Torres, the store's security guard, approached Bill Thompson with practiced caution. But as he drew closer, something in the veteran's eyes made him hesitate. "Sir, I'll need you to exit the premises," Michael announced, his voice carrying a note of reluctance. Bill Thompson slowly reached into his pocket, causing Rachel to gasp audibly. From his hidden observation point, James Maxwell tensed, watching the scene unfold. What emerged from Bill's pocket wasn't what anyone expected. The fluorescent lights caught the metallic surface of his Purple Heart, Distinguished Service Cross, and Silver Star. The medals gleamed, telling a silent story of sacrifice and courage that no one in the store had bothered to see beneath his worn exterior. "I earned these in Vietnam." Bill's voice was steady, dignified. "Lost my whole platoon saving a village. Came home to nothing. All I'm asking for is to use your bathroom and maybe sit in your cafe for a few minutes to warm up." Michael Torres took a step back, his hand dropping from his security radio. The guard's face transformed as he noticed the veteran's bearing, the military precision still evident in his posture despite years of hardship. As a former serviceman himself, Michael recognized the telltale signs of a fellow warrior. Rachel Stevens stood frozen behind her counter, her earlier bravado evaporating. Other customers had stopped their shopping, drawn by the unfolding drama. Among them, James Maxwell continued his silent observation, his heart heavy with what he was witnessing. But the story took another turn when Margaret Wong, an elderly customer who had been quietly shopping in the housewares section, stepped forward. "I'll buy him a coffee," she announced, her voice clear and firm. "My Harold was in Vietnam too. Never came home." She turned to Bill, tears glistening in her eyes. "It's the least I can do for one of our heroes." Rachel Stevens found her voice again. "Ma'am, it's against store policy to dash policy." Margaret interrupted, her gentle demeanor hardening. "My husband died fighting for this country, and you're talking to me about store policy?" From his vantage point, James Maxwell watched as more customers began to gather. Some were filming with their phones, others whispering among themselves. He noticed Sarah Chun, the morning supervisor, emerging from the back office, drawn by the commotion. Before Sarah could intervene, another voice joined the chorus. David Martinez, a young man who had been stocking shelves nearby, stepped forward. "I'll pay for his coffee too," he declared. "And a sandwich. My brother's serving in Afghanistan right now." The atmosphere in the store had shifted dramatically. What had begun as an attempt to remove a homeless man had transformed into a moment of community recognition and support. But Rachel Stevens, perhaps feeling her authority threatened, made one final, fatal mistake. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "He's probably not even a real veteran. Anyone can buy medals at a pawn shop." The silence that followed was deafening. Bill Thompson stood straighter, if that was possible, his weathered face a mask of dignity in the face of such accusation. Michael Torres, the security guard, removed his store badge and laid it on the counter. "I quit," he stated simply. "I didn't serve my country to participate in this kind of discrimination." Sarah Chin finally reached the scene, but before she could speak, James Maxwell decided it was time to reveal himself. He stood up from his cafe table, coffee untouched, and walked toward the group. The store fell completely silent as recognition dawned on their faces. "Ladies and gentlemen, before I address what I've witnessed here today, I want to invite our viewers to subscribe to our channel. Stories like this need to be shared, and your support helps us continue exposing both injustice and the triumph of human dignity." James Maxwell approached Bill Thompson first, extending his hand. "Sergeant Thompson, it would be an honor to shake your hand." I apologize for how you've been treated in my store today. The CEO then turned to face his employees and the gathered crowd. His voice carried throughout the now silent store. What I've witnessed here today has shown me both the worst and the best of humanity. Rachel Stevens, you're fired, effective immediately. This company was founded on principles of respect, dignity, and service of values that our veterans fought to protect. But James Maxwell wasn't finished. He turned back to Bill Thompson. Sergeant, would you join me in my office? I believe we have much to discuss, including a job offer if you're interested. We need people with your character and experience in our organization. The story of what happened next at Blooming Life Essentials store number 447 would ripple through the entire company, leading to fundamental changes in corporate policy and culture. But perhaps more importantly, it would remind everyone who heard it that sometimes our greatest teachers come to us disguised as those we least expect. The transformation of Blooming Life Essentials began the very next day. James Maxwell didn't just offer Bill Thompson a job, he created an entirely new position, Director of Veteran Affairs and Community Outreach. The position came with a comprehensive benefits package, housing assistance, and most importantly, a platform to make real change. In his first week, Bill Thompson already began reshaping company policy. He established mandatory sensitivity training focusing on veteran issues and homelessness. But more than that, he brought a perspective that would revolutionize how Blooming Life Essentials approached community service. It's not about charity, Bill explained during his first corporate presentation. It's about dignity. Every person who walks through our doors has a story, has value, has something to contribute. I know because I lived it. The story of what happened at store number 447 spread rapidly through social media, thanks to the customers who had recorded the incident. But rather than trying to suppress the negative publicity, James Maxwell embraced it as a teaching moment. He appeared on national news programs, not to defend his company, but to acknowledge its failures and outline its path forward. Michael Torres, the security guard who had quit in protest, was offered a new position as Deputy Director of Security Training, working directly with Bill Thompson to reshape how the company's security personnel interacted with customers. His first initiative was to create a veteran-to-veteran support network within the company. But perhaps the most surprising transformation came from Rachel Stevens herself. After her very public firing, she reached out to Bill Thompson through his newly established office. Her letter of apology revealed her own struggles, a brother lost to PTSD after serving in Iraq, her own battles with prejudice and fear. Bill Thompson did something unexpected. He invited Rachel to join one of his training sessions, not as an employee, but as a participant. Her story, he believed, was just as important as his own. It highlighted how trauma and loss can manifest as prejudice, how pain can blind us to the humanity of others. 3 months after the incident, Blooming Life Essentials launched its Second Chances initiative. Every store now included a small cafe area where anyone could sit and warm up, use the restroom, or simply find a moment of dignity. The company partnered with local veteran organizations and homeless shelters to provide job training and employment opportunities. Margaret Wong, the elderly customer who had first stood up for Bill, became a regular volunteer at these cafe spaces. She shared stories of her Harold, keeping his memory alive while helping others find their path forward. David Martinez, the shelf stocker who had offered to buy Bill lunch, was promoted to community outreach coordinator at his local store. 1 year after the incident, Blooming Life Essentials hosted its first annual Community Service Awards. Bill Thompson stood at the podium, his medals now proudly displayed in his office rather than hidden in his pocket. The audience included employees, community leaders, and most surprisingly, Rachel Stevens. "A year ago, I was invisible," Bill began his speech. "Today, I stand before you not just as a veteran, not just as an executive, but as living proof that change is possible. That second chances aren't just something we talk about. They're something we live." The company's transformation hadn't gone unnoticed by the business world. Other corporations began to follow suit, implementing their own versions of the Second Chances initiative. James Maxwell was invited to speak at business schools and corporate conferences, sharing how one moment of crisis had led to a complete reimagining of corporate responsibility. But perhaps the most powerful moment came quietly, without fanfare. 2 years after the incident, Bill Thompson was working late in his office when a young homeless veteran walked into store number 447. Sarah Chun, who had been promoted to store manager, personally walked over to greet him. "Welcome to Blooming Life Essentials," she said, offering him a warm smile. "Would you like a cup of coffee?" The young man hesitated, his hands clutching his own set of medals. Sarah noticed them and smiled even wider. "You know, our Director of Veteran Affairs started right where you're standing. Would you like to hear that story?" As we conclude this remarkable tale of transformation and redemption, I encourage you to subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue sharing stories that remind us of the power of human dignity and the importance of giving everyone a chance to be seen, heard, and valued. The story of Blooming Life Essentials became more than just a corporate turnaround. It became a movement. Bill Thompson's experience sparked a national conversation about how we treat our veterans, our homeless, and ultimately each other. James Maxwell's willingness to acknowledge his company's failures and take decisive action showed that corporate responsibility could be more than just a buzzword. Today, if you walk into any Blooming Life Essentials store, you'll find a plaque that reads, "Every person has a story. Every story has value. Everyone deserves a second chance." These words, inspired by Bill Thompson's experience, serve as a daily reminder that sometimes our greatest moments of growth come from our darkest moments of shame. The company's annual report now includes not just profit margins and sales figures, but also the number of veterans hired, homeless individuals assisted, and lives touched through their community initiatives. James Maxwell often says that while the incident at store number 447 could have destroyed his company, instead it saved its soul. And Rachel Stevens? She eventually returned to Blooming Life Essentials, not as a customer service representative, but as part of Bill Thompson's outreach team. Her personal experience of transformation and redemption became a powerful part of their training program, showing that change is possible not just for organizations, but for individuals as well. As for Bill Thompson, he still keeps his medals in his pocket sometimes, not because he needs to prove who he is anymore, but to remember who he was and how far he's come. His story continues to inspire others, reminding us all that dignity, respect, and compassion aren't just noble ideals. They're the foundation of true success, both in business and in life. The end of this story is really just the beginning. Every day, in Blooming Life Essential stores across the country, new chapters are being written, new lives are being touched, new chances are being given. And it all started because one homeless veteran dared to stand tall, one CEO dared to watch and listen, and a community dared to care. Remember, sometimes the most powerful changes begin with the simplest acts of kindness. As you go about your day, consider this. Everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Everyone deserves a chance to be seen, heard, and valued. Everyone has the potential to transform not just their own life, but the lives of countless others. This is more than just a story, it's a call to action. What will you do with your chance to make a difference?